So let's talk about these Voltron Legendary Defender lions. This is a creation of RIOBOT or RIOBOT. These 5 lions each look pretty fantastic. I'm going to go through details about each one, more or less each one anyway. The whole set is pretty expensive. This is $700. So let's start with the black lion. This is a truly magnificent looking beast. It's got a lot of great paint apps and details. The wings can move along this hinge and also along this hinge. The head can move back and forth, up and down on its neck, and also this sort of motion, which isn't really a very likely motion in a lion. And the jaw can open. One downside is that the jaw has this sort of open at the bottom sort of portion, which is part of forming Voltron's head. Anyway, the limbs, I love the aggressive look of the limbs. It just looks mean and powerful. I should add that these shoulders, they actually have a little filler sort of component. I'm not sure where I put them, but I'm probably just going to leave them out because this is where the red and green lines connect. And the joints, the articulation is really great. The lion can abduct its limbs to a small amount. It's a mammal designed, it's designed after a mammal that is specialized for running. And so the fact that its limbs can't spread out or abduct very much is pretty much to be expected. The shoulder joint can rotate quite a bit. I assume it's 360 degrees. I haven't really tested it because I don't care that much. And we get plenty of movement at the elbow joint. Just a little clarification for cat anatomy. This is the wrist joint right here. And this would be technically the metacarpophalangeal joint. So the joint between the fingers and the hand. Cats actually walk on their fingers. Kind of a cool thing. And let's see, so we've got plenty of movement at the wrist joint and at that metacarpophalangeal joint. At the hind limb, we have similar articulation. We've got lots of movement at the hip, although one thing I'm disappointed about is that the hip joint in lion mode can't move any further forward or anteriorly than this. This is as far forward as that limb can move. Here's the knee joint. And then we have a pretty short little shank sort of region. Here's ankle, here's metatarsophalangeal joint. So this is the joint between the toes and the rest of the foot. So this is actually the foot. Remember that, once again, they walk on their fingers. Anyway, so plenty of articulation except for that hip joint not being able to move anteriorly. The tail has individual articulations, and that's pretty sweet. The tail does stay out pretty well. It retracts in when we go to Voltron mode. And I should also add that the black lion has some joints in the torso as well. So we can move this in a sort of dorsoventral manner. And there's a little bit of a hip twist here. So we can do a rolling movement. So this lion is utterly fantastic. I love it. Now we're going to look at the blue lion. The blue and yellow lions are basically the same kind of structure, the same build. So I'm not going to show the yellow lion a whole lot. But once again, we have the same number of joints. We've got shoulder and elbow. The elbow joint can flex quite a bit owing to the transformation. And then here's that wrist joint and the metacarpophalangeal joint. Or you could call it a mid-hand joint if you want. You don't want to go into the jargon. And at the hip, we have similarly lots of movement. So this shield sort of portion doesn't track with the hip. You can still move it around, but it's an independent piece. The knee joint is partially hidden, which is pretty realistic for for a quadrupedal mammal, which this line is designed after. There's the ankle joint and the midfoot joint, or metatarsophalangeal joint. And the tail, once again, it's got that great articulation. The head is beautiful. The mouth opens. We've got a mouth cannon in there. And just check out all the painted detail here. It's incredibly precisely done. We have the details inside the mouth. We have these little quintessence effects where these would glow blue in the show. Also, the blue lion and yellow lion can do a little bit of mediolateral movement, which is pretty cool. And this also allows Voltron to have a little bit of ankle rocking. The technical term is they can pronate and supinate the foot. This part moves up for transformation, but that's not really part of being the lion. Oh, I also forgot the head. We can move the head around a fair bit. You can look up and down to some extent. The neck also can move upward and downward. It's on a stiff joint, click joint. Now let's check out that yellow line. Basically the same deal, but it's got this big sort of structure on the thorax. I love these jaws, overlapping of the lower jaw. And once again, just admire all those paint apps. It's just really incredible. The precision of the molds, the lack of holes for putting screws. I mean, presumably this is where some screws went, but they're nice and hidden. And that's really satisfying. They just look so good. And finally, we get to the red and green lions, and these are the smallest. And here again, they're beautiful creations. So the red lion, just like the others, has the mouth cannon. The black lion is really the only one that doesn't have the mouth cannon. Lots of paint apps, great details on the face. A lot of times the different colors on the lions are due to different plastics, and sometimes it's painted. This the joint between the thorax and the abdomen can move in this dorsoventral manner, and that forms the elbow joint when it's in Voltron mode. Incidentally, this little portion right here, it actually comes out. This little piece can be slid out, and then the lion's pelvis and abdomen can be slid forward just a tiny bit. I don't really want to do that, so I'm not going to. I think it looks great just as it is. Let's move back to that head. I keep forgetting about movements of the head. So the head can move a little bit dorsoventrally, and also it can rotate all the way around. Not that that's something a lion would do, but it's necessary for wrist movement as Voltron. The red lion's forelimb has a little bit of a weird articulation, so shoulder joint moves presumably 360 degrees. The elbow joint, though, only moves to here. So that's like maybe 135 degrees. This is 180. So the elbow, I'd like for it to fold up a little bit more, to flex more. Wrist joint and metacarpophalangeal joint. But the elbow goes backward. And this is for the transformation. And then this completely collapses in. Once again, transformation. And then the hind limbs, similar movement as with the other lions. So they have the hip joint, knee joint, ankle joint, and metatarsophalangeal joint, or call it a midfoot joint if you want. It's not quite accurate, but whatever, it's close enough. The tails on the red and green lines are pretty short, which is okay. I don't mind it so much. So that's the red lion. And then the green lion, we have a similar story. We have this shield sort of thing. Just pop that off just so you can see the green lion in all her glory. I keep also forgetting to mention that for all 5 lions, the limbs can abduct a little bit. and adduct to some extent. I can move in and out there, put that shield back. But similar articulation. I saw a review suggesting that these lions were kind of fragile, and I sort of agree, but don't agree exactly. Let's have a look. All right, so here's the foot of the green lion. Got ankle, metatarsophalangeal joint, and there's this little ball and socket joint there. And this portion here is about 2 millimeters wide. So it's not fragile exactly, but I wouldn't hand this to a kid. This is not a child's toy. So it would be silly to assume that it is strong enough to hand it off to a 4-year-old without supervision. And there are other examples. I've actually popped a foot or a hand off by accident, and it pops back on easily enough. But I wouldn't call it fragile, but I also wouldn't say let your kid play with it. It's not a child's toy. It's too expensive for them anyway. I should add that all of these lines have some die-cast metal in them, which gives them a really nice heft, but it's not too much. So the lines that form the legs for Voltron, this middle portion here, this abdomen, is solid die-cast metal. And I think that's it for die-cast. For the red and green lions, it's just this thorax shell sort of part. The dorsal and the ventral portions, these are all die-cast. For the black lion, there's a lot of die-cast in the sort of pelvis area. So let's see, these are plastic. So parts of the legs, the thighs, are die-cast metal. Got a very heavy feel to it. And there might be some portions of the pelvis. I'm feeling up the black lion here, and definitely the thighs are die-cast, and maybe there's some weighting in there just to give it some heft. And this is also advantageous for when we form Voltron, because we want to have as much weight toward the bottom as possible to make Voltron nice and stable. So it makes sense that the black lion would have his die cast in the hips, and then for the legs they would have die cast in the middle. It would make more sense to have some at the front ends as well. And for these lions, having die cast gives them a nice heft, and I like that. Although for the arms, you don't really want to have them have a huge amount of weight, because we don't want Voltron to topple over. There are quite an enormous number of accessories. Here are all of the jaw blades. I don't really care about accessories, so I'm not really going to emphasize these. Here's the cannon for the red lion. Plant shooting sort of vine cannon for the green lion. Underwater sonic weapon for the blue lion. So this is where it clips into the back. The yellow lion has that very elaborate sort of, I guess we'll call it a rocket pack. And then it also has portions that go onto the limb. So there's two of these, a right and a left. I'm only showing one. And then also these for the hands, the paws. And once again, a right and a left. I'm only showing one of them. The black lion also has an accessory. So these wings, they're detachable. And for whatever reason, I guess I ordered the exclusive edition. I didn't realize I did that, or maybe they're all exclusive. And they come with these humongous wings that make the lion move through space at some sort of staggering speed. And we're just going to go ahead and put these in place. And there we go. Here's the black lion with its huge wings which could also go on Voltron. Incidentally, I'm going to show the Voltron specific accessories, but after we've formed Voltron. It does look pretty cool, although it is a little over the top, and this isn't how I would choose to display the Black Lion all the time. So let's go form Voltron now. We'll start off by retracting the tail. Note that the tail has these portions that are just a little bit wider, and that keeps the tail pretty steady so it doesn't accidentally collapse inward when you don't want it to. And we just collapse the tail in, push it in place. Sometimes it kind of falls out again, but it mostly stays there. Straighten out the legs all the way. And the arms, forelimbs I should say, we open up these little hatches and collapse those into this little opening. These little doors, once the limbs are collapsed in, oh wow, that was the first time it's shut properly. The last time I did this, it didn't shut, so the camera's going, I guess. Huh. Okay, yeah, this is how it worked the last time. It didn't quite close. Apparently it can close, I just haven't. There we go. All right, and then we turn these around so the limb portion, the folded up limb part, is going backwards, and then we collapse these in. And of course, as is tradition, we'll leave the head for last. So there's the Black Lion. Red and green lion transformations are the same, so I'm only going to show one. And this is, I think this is pretty cool how this is done. So let's see, first we move this hind limb into position and start collapsing the knee and the shank. And this part, there's a little flange there, right there, that holds this in place. And then this takes a little jimmying, we fold this in, pull that out a little, and there we go. And then do the same for the right limb. The tail stays out pretty well and then collapses in. And note these any little tabs. Those help the tail stay in place. So we maneuver it this way so the tabs are facing laterally. And now the tail stays in there pretty well. And I'll do the other limb shortly, but probably off camera. The thorax opens up, so this is a two-part movement. It slides up and then it folds out. And we start collapsing these limbs in. So there's a little bit of finagling here. We maneuver the limbs to the inside while also folding the elbow backwards. And then before we put everything in place, we fold the wrist and hand so that it's all collapsed. And then a little bit of fiddling, we get everything to fit in there. And then where we forget, we open these little parts out. So this is like fake shoulder joints. And collapse everything in, and there we go. This doesn't quite come together, but it's close. Collapse the head in. This part right here, recall that this was something that could be removed, and then we would pull this pelvis sort of part backward and stick that in there for Voltron's arm. But of course that's not necessary because I just left that in. And then we pull out this little part and we slide it all the way up and then put it down. Oops. Anyway, that goes into That becomes a shoulder joint. And to get this to work, then the elbow joint, we turn this in this direction. This isn't quite cartoon accurate, but it works. So put the head in place. There we go. So this is the elbow joint. And this makes a lot of sense because we've got all this stuff back here that would get in the way of the elbow. And on this side, we don't have all that stuff, all that extra armor, dorsal armor. So we can fold up the arm like that. And for the left arm, the green line will do the exact same transformation. So I'm not going to show that on camera. And now we'll do, actually, let's do the yellow line because I like this one better. So we collapse this part in. I love that. And then we move the head up to form a foot. And then pull this sort of heel spur out. That was harder to do the first time, so I'm glad to see it isn't so hard to do this time. And we fold up these forelimbs so they can form part of the back of the foot. And then we collapse in these hind limbs. Let me see if I remember how to do this. So these parts are going to be facing downward like this. And there we go. And then these collapse in a little bit. The tail goes in. And note this little flat spot on the tail. There we go. So those flat parts are facing up and down so that they fit perfectly within that little slot. And now the tail stays in there pretty well. And this back portion, I accidentally left it already transformed. So it's already ready to go. There was a little door sort of thing, like right here. See if we're going to get that to open. There we go. So here it is as just the lion. We've got this sort of hatch over the rear of the lion, and then we collapse that inside. And let's see what happens if I pull this part out. There we go. So there's a little thing right here. Whoops. And this is what holds the feet and presumably a bit of the shank of the black lion in Voltron mode. And so that's Voltron's, what would that be? The right leg, left leg. For the green lion, transformation is the same as red, except this shield portion will get moved to the back end. We'll do that shortly. And now that shield just goes on this rear portion. There we've got a left arm. And now we form Voltron. So, oh, I didn't notice this before. These legs collapse in. Let's see if we can get them to stay out for Voltron mode. All right. Before we have this one transformed yet, pull out that little slot. And now we can fit that leg in there. And of course, as is tradition, got to do it this way, form the head last. And getting Voltron's face to fold out is a little bit of a trick. So I'm probably going to do that off camera with a little toothpick or something. There we go. Voltron's head fits very nicely within the jaw of the black lion. We fold out the what I think are usually called horns and close up this back panel. And now we've got Voltron. Let's see, I'll have to hold him away from the camera because he's fairly substantial in size. So he's very cool looking. Let's see, we've got lots of articulation, knees can bend quite a bit. We've got ankle rocking sort of thing. Oh wait, I forgot. I was supposed to collapse these parts in. Forgot to do that. And then these thighs extend. There we go. Okay, that's better. So Voltron's a little more in proportion, and here the black lion tail is falling out. That does happen sometimes. A lot of moving parts. And Voltron's arms move around. They're very nicely proportioned. There are almost no click joints on Voltron, but things tend to stay. Oh, just now said they stay pretty well, and then he slips like that. So he's pretty cool looking. Nice face. Arms are well proportioned as compared with a Playmates version. The legs are a little chunkier than I'd like, although having recently discovered that those thighs can extend, that was a nice discovery. I literally just now figured that out. It's a really beautiful Voltron. So there's a little bit in the directions about how you're supposed to hold a hand underneath the legs when you're picking them up. So I'm going to go and not do that. And you know, he's pretty sturdy. I'm still going to hold my hand under these legs when I'm picking him up because he costs a lot of money and I don't want to take any dumb chances and break him. But he's pretty sturdy. He's not for a child to play with, but he's too expensive to let a child play with anyway. And one other bit of articulation I forgot to talk about in Voltron mode is how the chest can move up and down. You have this articulation here, and then also this articulation a bit farther down, and Voltron can twist around a little bit. Voltron can turn his head. He can look up, although that's partially just kind of like the transformation of the black lion. So you can look up, fly through space. Let's see, can he wobble his head? Oh, look, he can, just a little bit. There again, that's because of the transformation from the black lion. So there's Voltron. Let's have a look at his accessories. Oh yeah, one thing to note, there is a little bit of sliding in and out. It's sturdy, but it would be nice if this sliding didn't happen. I wish it didn't slide. Okay, now let's look at some accessories. We have a sword. This is the most famous, I guess. I wish they had done Blazing Sword at some point in the cartoon. Like, come on, man. And we've tested this out. The red lion can very easily grip this sword. So that's cool. There are these double knife things that I'm pretty sure we never saw in the cartoon. They look cool though. There they are. And there's this shield sort of assembly. This is to make Voltron's wings into a shield. So let's try that out, shall we? Step one is we take out this little thing. These little parts that hold the wing onto the black lion have to be folded, fit into here. There we go. Now we do the same for the other wing. Get the cat hair out of there. And then we put this back in place. Oops, it's upside down. And now we've got Voltron's big shield. It's actually pretty huge. It's like almost as tall as he is. And there are two accessories. So this allows the shield to be attached to the dorsal surface of the green lion. So it's like a shield that attaches to his arm, like how Captain America usually holds his shield. Or this can attach to the shield, and then the Voltron can hold this in the arm, in the green lion's jaws, so in his left hand. Which I guess Captain America does that a little bit too. And so here's Voltron with that shield. Shield is kind of heavy. Unfortunately, his arm can't really hold it up. It droops. He can hold his sword though, so at least there's that. Let's just take this shield out. Probably not going to use the shield very much, if ever. He is so super cool. Like, everything is so precision engineered. It looks so good in the Lions mode, and Voltron is also very good looking, although I think the Lions are the stronger version. I wish that we had the option of not going with all the accessories. I could have done with just his sword and literally nothing else, and that would have been fine for me. But that wasn't the option I had. I would have preferred to have no accessories except the sword and knock $100 or $150 off the price.
So is this version of Voltron worth getting? It's a $700 toy. And to answer that, I've got sort of a two-part answer. I actually tried to create my own version of the red and green lions for the Playmates version. So Playmates version looks pretty good, but the arms are just weird and beefy and grotesque, and it doesn't look okay. The arms don't look good at all. Everything else looked pretty good. And so I worked for 9 months using a program called Tinkercad to design my own red lion. And I used Lego parts for the joints. And 9 months later, I had enough printed that I could put it together, and I posed it as an arm of Voltron, and it looked pretty good, and then transformed it into the red lion, and it looked terrible. It was just awful. So I was really discouraged. I gave up for a year and a half, I don't know, and then decided to come back to it. This time tackled the green line instead and worked on that using a different program. It was Autodesk Fusion 360. And I worked on that for a while, for, I don't remember, a year maybe, not 10 months. And it was definitely a better version. It looked a lot better as a lion, and I think as an arm. It was complicated, and I was still working on it, but I got burnt out. And then a year or two later, this came out. As a substitute for spending hours and hours and so much money on printing, I would say this is easily a better buy than me spending all that effort trying to print my own. But of course, normal humans don't try to do that, I think. That's kind of a weird thing to do, to try to print your own, although some people do that, like me. Anyway, so the other factor is sort of like my emotional state. Like, as this pre-order was coming in, I felt kind of sick to my stomach, like, oh my gosh, I had spent so much money, or was about to spend so much money to buy this, and was feeling very uncertain. And then it came in the mail because I decided not to cancel my order. It arrived, took it out, started playing with it. The lions are beautiful. I am so in love with these lions. They're so great. And I finally assembled Voltron, was kind of savoring the experience. And Voltron, he's great. He's not perfect. There are some things I wish were a little bit different, but it's very good. And the molding is so sharp and excellent. The articulation on in as lions and as Voltron, it's great. So it's a very high quality product. It's sturdy enough for an adult collector, not for children, but don't give it to your kids if you have any. So is it worth getting? I can't answer completely unambiguously. For me, I'm glad I got it. I don't have any buyer's remorse. I'm glad I bought this. It's a fun toy, and it means that I'm going to have to save for a few months at least and not buy anything significant for a little while. But I think that's okay.